the Alaska Fisheries Development Foundation. We are the sub-awardee managing the Joint Innovation Projects Program, which is one piece of the research and development component of the Alaska Mariculture Cluster effort. So our primary goal of this meetup is for the Joint Innovation Projects to give project leads a chance to share on what they've been working on, any challenges or successes they've had so far, and provide an opportunity to connect on work that might have synergies. So we are packing 8 projects into this meetup today. I added an extra 15 minutes just so we have some buffer time for Q&A after everyone presents. That being said, I'll ask for project leads before your presentation starts to put your name and affiliation and contact email into the chat, just in case we want, if anyone wants to follow up and they don't have your contact info already. And we have 10 minutes slated for each presenter. Give like 5 to 8 minutes for presentations, and then a couple of minutes at the end for Q&A. And for anyone asking questions, you're welcome to put a question into the chat that I can ask to the group, or feel free to use the raise your hand function in Zoom to ask yourself, and we'll just have some open dialogue after each presentation. So we'll get going here. First up, we have Spencer Sarin presenting on behalf of Marine Biologics for their project Novel Compound Discovery in Newly Domesticated Alaskan Kelp. And I'll let you take it from here, Spencer.
Great. Okay, I'm sharing. Hopefully that is successful. Can everyone see my screen? I'm just going to go with my gut and say everything's working great. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Alex.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. That's all I want, just to feel some connection here. Okay, great. I'm Spencer Sarin. I work for Marine Biologics. I'm the head of science, and we're really excited to talk about this project with the AFDF, the Novel Compound Discovery in Newly Domesticated Alaskan Kelp. And I'll touch on what those domesticated kelps are in a second. But I wanted to start. Do I advance? Advance. With this. So right now, Marine Biologics is very fortunate to be participating on a number of initiatives led by the AFDF around sort of the chemicals of seaweed. Beginning with a project and sort of my introduction to this group in sort of April 2024 with the 2024 seaweed tissue analysis. A project which looked at around 97 samples of seaweeds, about 17 different species, reds, browns, and greens, wild species, primarily a few farmed samples. There was an opportunity to look into the chemical composition of those species that was generated as a result of this project. This work is ongoing, but it's wrapping up very soon, Alex, I promise. And it's been a great intro into the chemicals of seaweed and sort of the interesting components related to these Alaskan seaweeds in particular. And I've had a chance to discuss this matter with a couple of people on the call here. But today we're going to discuss this joint innovation project around novel compound discovery. And for this work, we're looking just at 3 species. Again, I'll touch on those in a second. It's a lot more detailed in the chemistry that we're going into and looking a little bit more at different ways to extract specific chemicals from these kelps. And for this work, we've got 18 samples of different cultivated varieties and some wilds. And this actually butts up really nicely against the 2025 seaweed tissue analysis, which is some ongoing work, again, with a lot of the farmers who are on this call, looking at farm samples generated from across Alaska for chemical composition. And I have given this, I'm a namer. I like naming things. I'm calling this the Alaska Seaweed Composition Highway, because I did recently take the ferry from Homer to Kodiak. So I feel like I know what that is. And I have now adopted this name. So we're going to talk about the JIP, but touch a little bit on the 2025 seaweed tissue analysis for reasons that will become clear in a second. So the gist of this project is we're looking at 3 species, relatively novel for cultivation, or perhaps Johnny may disagree with the bull kelp, but other ones like dragon kelp and split kelp are relatively new to cultivation in Alaska. And for this work, we were fortunate to partner with Lexa Meyer and Elf for developing the sort of nursery setup for these species and outplant across Kodiak. So we had the support of Alf and Lexa, that's Alaskan Ocean Farms, and then also Tolif and Adelia from Alaskan Sea Green. So we took these relatively novel species in terms of cultivation, and we planted them as sort of the first step of this project. That took place kind of September, grow them over the winter, as you're all familiar with, and then harvest in sort of April and May. And at that point, that brought us to sort of June, our second step of the project, and that was about turning these seaweeds into samples that we could actually do some sort of chemical extractions and analysis on. And this was all work that was done at the Kodiak Seafood and Marine Science Center over the month of June. For this, we had a research scientist, Emil Dancer, who was sort of the guy who did all the work, just kind of the guy who cheered him on. But we sort of stayed up in that part of Alaska for June. We received a number of frozen seaweed samples, in some case fresh seaweed samples, and then just went through sort of a relatively rudimentary shredding and drying and labeling and boxing and sending off to various labs type work. And that was also in support of the 2025 seaweed tissue analysis. So we really focus on those three species for our JIP project, but of course, the opportunity to test other species from across Alaska was done during this work. So that was step two. That occurred in June, and now that brings us to now. So the next kind of the nuts and bolts of this project are to take those three species and to selectively extract some sort of targeted chemicals associated with kelp. Our extraction is done in Roscoff, France. We have a partner laboratory as part of Marine Biologics based in France. But I just wanted to highlight some of the interesting chemicals that are present within these kelps. And the green numbers are the data that we have from the 2024 seaweed tissue analysis results. So we're basing this off the 2024 benchmarks, but we'll be collecting the 2025 data, and we'll see how well these cultivated species compare to their sort of wild uh, counterparts. So we'll selectively extract them into specific components. We'll do some chemical and activity testing with our internal and external lab partners. This is the stage of the project that we're at. If you look at the kind of key objectives for the project, and I'll just sort of finish with that in the interest of time. We're going to measure the chemicals of bull kelp, dragon kelp, split kelp. That's going to happen over this month and the next month, as well as doing some sort of introductory chemistry on the ways we can extract them with highly efficient ways. And then we're going to take those chemical compositions, break it down into market segments that could benefit from the chemicals that we're able to extract, and then really sort of hone our extraction methods to fractionate the seaweed to deliver, extracts that are in alignment with what those markets are requiring or requesting. So that's the gist of the project, and thank you for that, everybody.
Thank you, Spencer. I am hopeful I'm not breaking up any longer, but I'm not sure.
So far, so good, Alex.
Okay, great. I'll open up the floor for any questions that anyone might have for Spencer, or feel free to just pop them into the chat.
And I put my email on all of this if people want to reach out to me separately. I know this can be quite a lengthy conversation on the chemicals of seaweed, and happy to discuss and collaborate and brainstorm. Love the opportunity.
I had a quick question.
Sure.
This is Abizer from Focon Foods. These are just at this point just measurement of key chemicals. You're not focusing on extraction at this point.
No, we'll do both. So we're going to do some extraction and we'll do measurements. We'll measure the unextracted chemicals as a starting point, and then we'll do sort of very basic fractionations and measure the composition in the fractions and how the specific chemicals might have changed over those sort of routine extractions. So we'll be doing both.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Look forward to the next step. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ellen has put into the chat here, anything totally unexpected?
Anything totally unexpected? Well, right now we're still just at the phase of they're dried and off to the lab. So nothing to report yet, but don't worry, Ellen, you'll be the first to hear. But there's some cool, as I come more in the 2024 results, there's some interesting things that will come out in the final report, and maybe that will raise some eyebrows. Perfect. Like that. Speechless.
Well, we'll be anxiously awaiting the results, Spencer. I'm excited, about sort of these, two projects that have built upon each other and all of your work with the seaweed tissue analysis. We're grateful to have you part of our Alaskan mariculture community.
The Alaska Seaweed Composition Highway, you mean, of course.
Sorry, exactly. Previously known as the 100 Seaweeds Project, right? All right, well, we'll keep going here. I don't think I see Kyle Newman having joined. So, Francis, are you ready? Do you mind if we just move on? Looks like you're pulling your camera up here.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, so Francis is here representing Pacific Hybrid with the projects developing hybrid oyster seeds for Alaska shellfish growers. Thank you, Spencer. Thank you, Francis.
Thank you. All right. Well, right. Thank you, Alex, for that introduction. So this project is about breeding oysters, and then so I kind of want to spend a first few slides on kind of how we do breeding, and then what are hybrid oysters. So these two photos were taken at like two different bays in Washington. So these are kind of somewhat typical habitats you will see in a lot of Washington bays. It's kind of see a lot of shellfish on the ground, including oysters, clams, so on and so forth. So our breeding methods actually kind of use natural populations of oysters, and so it's kind of to produce non-GMO product. And so the way we do it is we collect a bunch of wild oysters and start randomly select one female, one male, and then within the in the lab and do kind of 2 cycles of breeding. So for here, I'm just calling it generation 1 and then generation 2 inbred because it's within family breeding. And so this is one example. So in the lab, we typically each round we start hundreds of families by using 2 to 300 wild oysters. So once we kind of repeat that process and have a lot of families, and each generation gets tested in the field, on farm, or in any sort of natural environment, so we can select the top families to kind of keep going with the breeding process. And once we get to the inbred line, the inbred generation, this is kind of what we do a little differently than most other breeding programs. Is we take these inbred lines and then do what we call diallele crosses, which is what you're seeing here. One male, one female from each inbred line, and then kind of cross with all other lines in all possible combinations. So for example, let's see here if I can get the marker going here. Oh, okay. So for example, we got line B here, cross with A, just calling B by A. C by A is line C, cross mated with line A. So we were able to carry out this process, this cross earlier in the year, and then we produced about 25 new hybrids. And once we have done this step, and then after a few years, we have the option to actually make additional crosses. Like, let's see here. Try to advance my slide real quick. Oops. Oh, second. All right, there we go. So once we have this first step of hybrid production, once we have completed that, and we have the option actually to cross two different hybrids, well, call them a single hybrids here, and creates double hybrids. So we'll be able to produce 4 different single hybrids in one step by just crossing two families. And that's what I'm showing on the right here. So right now we're at the step of generation 3 single hybrid, and this is actually not a kind of brand new concept. This was kind of started in the major food industry. So we're seeing production of corns, U.S. corn industry back actually to the to many years ago, and you can see the increase in production after kind of this creation of double crosses and single crosses, and the huge increase in production after people start to use this method. So, and we were able to at Leopold Water, in collaboration with the NOAA scientists, deploying about 30 families, 30 hybrid families into Alaska waters earlier this year. Also, actually, to put these hybrids in a second location, that is in collaboration with the seagrove oysters. So the animals were deployed in little pouches and then into rack systems near Ketchikan. And so these oysters are currently in the waters, and we expect to collect data next month, and hopefully, not hopefully, and we'll be able to kind of analyze their performances kind of started in April, and then so about 5 months in the field, and then we're able to kind of continue that selection process, and then we expect to produce best hybrids in 2026, and then we'll be able to kind of move on to producing double hybrids the following year, and that'll be the update for today, and open up any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If anyone has a question, feel free to raise hands or occupy into the chat. Francis, do you have if you were to guess which hybrid combination is going to be the most successful, would you have any idea or?
Yeah. So from single hybrids to double hybrids, we can make calculations and kind of predict who will do best. But from inbred lines to single hybrids, it's very difficult because there's a genetic component called non-additive. So basically, we'll need to go through the whole field trial and then the farm testing to know exactly which combination does the best.
I just to follow up to that, Francis, what are the kind of criteria that you're grading those hybrids on? Like, what are the sort of, I don't know, what's the spider chart of oysters?
Yeah, that's a great question. For seed, meaning when they're small, like about 3 to 4 millimeters, what we could do is size and count, meaning the growth and survival. But then when I get to larger size, we'll be able to start getting kind of dimensions and morphometrics, including the shell colors and then their cup depth, and so on and so forth into our breeding, into our matrix.
Right. Well, we'll keep moving here. If anyone has any further questions for Francis, feel free to, ask him directly in the chat or contact via email. Still no Kyle, so I'll move him to the end if he is able to join us later on. And looks like Elizabeth, you are already ready here. So Elizabeth is it's the first time I am seeing you on video. Nice to see you. Glad you could join us. And she's representing Organized Village of Cake on their project developing increased survival techniques for shellfish enhancement of 2 different species through implementing predator protection in Southeast Alaska.
Thank you, Alex. Is this showing you the full screen slide, or is it showing you the presenter view?
It's currently the presenter view. I think that you sent them to me, so I could probably pull up here as well if that's easier.
Are you seeing just the
There we
slide
go.
now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Figgis. I'm a consultant based in Juneau. I'm working with Organized Village of Cake on this project. We also have Justin McDonald with us in the room today, I believe. Justin, are you on here still?
Yes, I am.
Justin is the Natural Resources Director at Organized Village of Cake, so we're both working on this project together. This project is similar to the first presentation we saw today. I thought that was a really nice slide of the timeline and where the specific grant-funded project is found within that. Similar to that first presentation, Organized Village of Cake has been working on shellfish enhancement for non-commercial purposes for multiple years now, under the umbrella of Shellfish Gardens programming. And so this work has filled a really critical funding gap to be able to look specifically at funding seeding of various species and then using these specific types of netting material to protect the seeded shellfish from predators. The issue that we're dealing with down in Southeast Alaska is that increased sea otter populations have been threatening all the different shellfish throughout the region. And there's this real critical need right now to develop solutions for not only how to collect shellfish for seed and how to get the seed out onto the grounds with high survival rate, but how to protect the juvenile shellfish once we've got them on the beaches. Before we applied for this funding, the prior ongoing Shellfish Gardens work, like we had this kind of fall on our face situation where I think Justin can speak to this a little bit. We got all this seed from Alutiiq Pride Marine Institute, who's our partner on this. We went out and we seeded on a beach in Cake, and within a month, the sea otters and the starfish had basically decimated the beach where that was seeded. And on the right on this slide, you can see an example of a hole dug by a sea otter. And it almost felt like we were ringing the dinner bell when we tried to go out and seed the beach. And so ever since that time, 2 years ago, we've been working to try to figure out how to make sure that we can follow these juveniles all the way into adulthood and protect them from predation, both by sea otters and starfish. And Justin, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to why this work matters for people in Cake and why Organized Village of Cake is so interested in doing this for non-commercial purposes.
Sure. So I came up with some bullet points just for speed of time. If I talk on my own, I'll take up all our time. So why it's important. Shellfish are more than just food. They are a living connection to culture and tradition. That's just, that's such a broad, a vague statement. It can get so in depth in there as far as this living connection to the culture and tradition. Shellfish enhancement helps restore and protect traditional resources. It ensures these foods remain available for current and future generations, which is again one of the main reasons, is that our children and grandchildren and their children will have sustainable shellfish biomass when they come into their own as well. Cultural subsistence significance. Shellfish like clams, cockles, and crab are core parts of the traditional native diet. Harvesting is both a subsistence activity and a cultural ceremony. It supports intergenerational learning, elders teaching youth traditional ways. Shellfish harvesting is a communal practice that strengthens identity and belonging. These activities are deeply tied to place-based knowledge and language. So, I think that sums it up, and in all the reasons why OVK and cake, people of cake, find this work very important, why it's so important to us. Look at, I'll just refer to the state of the nation right now. If things get any worse, our food supplies from the stores and get barged in, or ferried in, we could lose connection with that. Prices are going to go sky high, and say about 60% of our diet is from the land. And so, we're really sitting good with where we're at here right now to be able to live off the land with all our wild foods if it came down to that. And again, that cultural tradition, that our grandparents, their grandparents, and, all those that have gone before us, since time immemorial have depended on. It's their connection to the land. Been stewards of the land for so long. It's like tending to your own garden. If each of you have your own garden outside your place or flowers, you don't want anyone else coming and trampling it, messing with it. You're protective of it because it's yours. It's your baby. It's the same way with our shellfish, our shellfish beds. Our land. It's the same way. It's our baby. We need to tend to it. Our ancestors have been tending to it in a successful way for since time immemorial. It wasn't until contact and outsiders coming in thinking they can do better when we seen that turnaround and we started having our problems. And so, very important that we're able to enhance our shellfish beds. We have other projects that are going on that Dr. Figgis has been very crucial in helping our community as well, as far as herring restoration. Very vital and important to people of Cake to restore these things so our children can have more. And again, who knows what's going to happen with the state of the nation, and if we get cut off from source, we're okay. We can live off the land, which would be a lot healthier source of food and sustenance for our people. So, not just from a physical and nutritional aspect, from a cultural and traditional aspect as well, that this is very important. It's who we are. It's our identity. It's our people that have gone on before us, and it's our people who are coming behind us as well. But I can go on and on about that, but thank you for that opportunity to share that.
Thank you, Justin. And so I will try to just go through for everyone what our 3 objectives were with this work. And then I'll highlight a few things where we've kind of deviated or grown in the project, and then we'll have some time for questions. So our first objective was to work with the hatchery, with the Ludic Pride Marine Institute, as they refine techniques to maximize their own growth and survival for the cockles and the softshell clams as listed in our title. What we've ended up doing actually is expanding that species list to include butter clams and little neck clams, both species that are of subsistence and personal use interest in cake and of concern, especially as I mentioned, right before we started this project, we had this kind of fall on our face moment where the test beach basically got wiped out from butter clams, which are the most prevalent species in cake. And so it was really shocking. It was really concerning to see that kind of reliable species just disappear from the test beach. And then we had already had prior concerns about cockles and little necks. What we ended up doing this year is actually removing softshell clams from the study for a few reasons. One reason being that they're less utilized by locals, and so we actually had a hard time figuring out where to go search for them. But also they are located in a totally different part of the beach from the other 3 species. And so as you'll see in the next slides, our work to try to deal with predator control netting, we can hit 3 species with 1 net versus having to split the nets into 2 different areas on the beaches if we added in softshell clams. And the picture here on the left is showing a technique called fluffing the beach. So overturning the area where we're about to lay down a predator control net there. And that's just an example of 3 of the local youth who have helped us with multiple engagement events on this work. Our second objective with this work is to determine the optimum installation and tending techniques for these predator control blankets, as they were called in our grant application. You can call these blankets, you can call them nets, but these are basically a net material purchased from Norplex down in Seattle that we can either hook them together or keep them individually in whatever size we want. And most of our sizes are, I think they're 10 by 40. And we have, in some cases, hooked them together, 2 together, or had 2 right next to each other. What these photos are showing on the left, we have November 2024, an example of when we moved a set of 2 of these nets slightly to a different size during the summer of 2024, right before we got going with this project. We thought that our huge amount of starfish on the beach was going to necessitate us using these rocks around the perimeter of every net that we installed. We found that those definitely helped, but I'll show a few more photos today that we've kind of determined that they're not necessary, which really has helped us reduce the manual labor that it takes to install and tend to these nets. We had some concerns in our first year of whether or not the large amounts of algae growth and kelp and seaweed growth on them would help or harm the shellfish. But the photo on the right here shows one of our May 2025 events where the rocks and the covered nets are on the right, and the brand new net that just got laid down after fluffing is on the left. So all we've done this year is install with just rebar, and we found similar rates of starfish getting under it and no issues so far with sea otters being able to dig through. Here's a few more photos. This was a really cool experience to have when Jeff and Annette from APMI were able to come down in May and both assist OBK tribal staff with harvesting shellfish for seed and making sure that all the shellfish had human couriers to get them up to the hatchery in Seward safely. And then they also held a community meeting and came out into the field to work with community members and teach us a little bit about these predator control nets, how well they're working, and actually confirmed for us that the heavy amount of kelp and seaweed and various growth on these nets is actually most likely assisting the shellfish, creating a more beneficial environment for their survival and their thriving. I'll show a close-up of this in a later slide, but there's a puddle of water on the net underneath Jeff, who's in the kind of the center of that photo there holding a shovel. And that is an attempted sea otter hole digging into the net. Our third objective is to complete 12 months of a trial grow-out period with 4 controlled scenarios. We're kind of in the middle of this, and Alex and I have talked a little bit about like things that have shifted with our timeline. But as I said, since this project is plopping down in the middle of a longer ongoing work, I'm not sure which of the 12 months I'll be able to capture in our reporting, because I was realizing I'm not sure technically if our second follow-up biomass survey will fall under the grant period or if it might be like a month after. But we've got multiple beach sites that we're working on, looking at biomass before and after. We're doing, like I said, 3 species that we'll be outplanting this fall. And this is the example on the right here on the photo of a sea otter attempted to dig a hole down in there, and you can see the net is fully intact in that photo. So it failed to get through. It appears that even just with basic rebar stakes, this is able to hold up. This net was installed last winter as well and is having no issues staying where we put it. So I just want to end with talking a little bit about the engagement that we've done, which is a biomass survey completed this June, which we're planning again for next June. We collected seed this April and May for the 3 species. In May, we had those outreach events where folks came and helped us fluff 2 different beaches, check on netting at one beach, install an additional netting at another beach. They also participated in a community presentation from APMI in Cake in person that month. We also have installed nets last January and last month as well. In July, we added another net at our 3rd beach site. And then we are planning some more net tending this August. And more exciting as well as brand new to us, we're going to be experimenting with feeding the shellfish, meaning using traditional methods to place deer fat into clamshells and bury that underneath the nets, which was a traditional way of basically enhancing the nutrients for shellfish. And then we'll be doing our big outplanting this fall. I apologize for going over time, but thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. This is all really interesting, and thank you, Justin, for sharing as well. It's exciting to see what has been working so far, and I look forward to hearing about the future reporting. And Elizabeth, we can set up a later meeting to discuss a project extension to extend your reporting period. That shouldn't be too big of an issue at all. Does anyone have any questions before we move on?
Quick question. When you go to harvest, how's that going to work with the net? It looks like there's a lot of growth on top of the net. And I guess, is there also an interim harvest where you sort of monitor the size?
Yeah, I was just going to back up a few slides and show you. This slide is actually showing the underside on the left. This is one of the single nets we have. Like I said, I think they're 10 by 40. And so we did find that installing them single net at a time makes it really easy and not super labor intensive to be able to just peel it back to get at the shellfish underneath. And so I just was kind of interested to look at the base of the little plant species and kelp and seaweed that are growing there. But we found that it's like way lighter and easier to deal with if we don't zip tie multiple nets together. So Justin, do you have anything to add to that? Just that it doesn't seem like it's very hard to move this with a group.
No, I was surprised too when we first moved this net to do some fluffing with Jeff and his crew here. We pulled it back, and like she says on the picture on the left, that's what we saw on the bottom. So it was easy to pull back with a few people to pull it back to fluff it, and we uncovered what we did, and then easy to pull it back, and none of them broke off. And we weren't even anticipating, kelp to build to it like that and to have the benefits that it does, and, benefit the beach. But other than that, we weren't even planning on harvesting underneath the net. We were just going to let that sit and let those shellfish grow so to get to it.
Great. Thank you, Justin. All right, well, for the sake of time, I think we need to keep moving along here. Next up, we have Brianna Murphy representing Mother of Millions with their mobile seaweed processor.
Hey everybody, give me just 1 second. Let me share my screen. And can everybody see my screen okay?
I can see the screen, yes.
Awesome, thanks. Just give me 1 second. There we go. Okay, thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brianna Murphy. I'm a co-founder of Mothers of Millions, which is a mobile seaweed processor based primarily out of Seward, Alaska. My business partner, Kristen Smith, and I both come to the mariculture industry from a commercial fishing background, and our background in commercial fishing has informed a lot of our approach to our involvement in the seaweed industry and much of this project as well. This is a photo of our mobile seaweed harvester and processor, which is actually one of my business partner, Kristen's commercial salmon tenders that was repurposed to support this project. So the goal of this project was basically to design a mobile floating harvesting and processing vessel that was able to help commercial kelp farmers in Alaska with some of the high transportation costs and logistical challenges that they face in getting their kelp to market. That problem consists of both the actual act of harvesting large volumes of kelp biomass from commercial farms, getting those large volumes of kelp off the grow line and into some kind of vessel or some place where it can be stored, and then very importantly, stabilized pretty quickly before it's transported to its final destination. I'm sure, as you guys all know on here, there are many commercial farms in Alaska that are typically located in remote areas, far from towns, that are pretty well suited to kelp growth, but not usually super accessible. Sorry, I was just making sure the chat was not directed at me. So this project was actually sort of springboarding off of a project that we did in spring 2024. And so I pulled up this photo just for like a side-by-side comparison of what we did in spring 2024 and then some of the new things that we tried during the spring 2025 harvest. So in the photo on the left here, you can see, unfortunately, I didn't have a ton of great photos. But you can see that we loaded a refrigerated Connex onto the back deck of this commercial salmon tender vessel. It's adjacent to our kelp processing Connex here. So we brought the kelp aboard in this processing Connex that was DEC approved and organic certified for harvesting organic kelp. And then we immediately shredded and loaded that kelp into a freezer so that it could be stabilized immediately upon harvest. In spring 2025, we tried something a bit different and we were trying a different method of stabilization, basically shredding the kelp and storing it in IBC totes, which required a lot less energy consumption, a lot less space, and kind of opened the door up for some different transportation options and things like that. We are mostly done with this project just because it was largely focused on kind of mobilizing during the uh, spring 2025 harvest. So we were really just kind of trialing a Central Alaska in this May. We have completed all the harvesting, processing, and stabilization for the commercial farms that we worked with throughout the Prince William Sound region. We also worked with farmers that we harvested for throughout the past year to ensure that they were able to obtain organic certification for their kelp farms, which just basically expands the availability of markets for their kelp and increases the market value for their end product. We were also able to work with another commercial farmer in Southeast this year to harvest and process a portion of their farm, increasing our range of activity to include other regions of Alaska, which is something that we would like to do in the future. And as I mentioned, we shifted from our original plan to harvest, freeze, and stabilize kelp to basically harvest and stabilize kelp in IBC totes, just in a different manner, to respond to shifts in the commercial market. And the development of a sustainable, economically viable kelp industry throughout Alaska once the Build Back Better funding sunsets. Of course, any good project is not without its challenges. I used to fish for a captain that said the first casualty of war is the plan, and that was definitely our experience this year. In spring of 2024, we were able to harvest directly aboard the vessel. So we basically just released the grow lines from the farm and then towed them over with like a smaller skiff. And then we were able to bring the grow lines aboard using a power block on the larger vessel and then process within our kelp conics. Unfortunately, it seemed this year, I'm not sure why. I'm sure there were a variety of factors. But it seemed like the hold transportation shifts and just being kind of dragged through the water and being dragged up over the stern of the boat. So we ended up we had a couple of vessels on hand just in case we needed to try some different ways of processing. And so we ended up processing with a couple of different seine skiffs and gill netters just to be able to make sure that we were able to retain more of the kelp biomass as it came in off the line. Another challenge is just sort of the shifting markets for the kelp industry. It requires the processors to be quite adaptable. This is our second year of doing it, and it was sort of the second year that I wouldn't say last minute plans or markets kind of became available, but I think things change rapidly within the kelp industry, and so being adaptable and trying to work closely with the end markets to make sure that you're processing and stabilizing in a form that people want to buy is really important. And then obviously kind of adjusting your flow and logistics to go along with that can be a bit of a challenge. And we were lucky to be able to that didn't really pose too much of an issue for us this year. And then another issue that we ran into is sort of accurately forecasting farmers' kelp that they're harvesting. That's something that I think is going on basically all throughout the kelp industry and I think agriculture in general. And something that hopefully just with time and kind of farmers getting a better sense of how their sites and how much per pound of kelp their outplanted seed string will yield will hopefully produce some more reliable figures in the future. And that's basically all I have. I'm happy to take any questions now or wait till the end. And I did put my contact information in the chat, and it's on the slide as well.
Thank you so much. This is all very exciting and great to see how you've been able to adapt and grow. as farmers are producing more kelp. Do we have any questions right away for Brianna?
I saw Elizabeth's hand, but I'll start us off. Brianna, I'm curious what, like, when the day was nice and the weather was calm, what kind of volume you were able to process in a day using sort of this onboard stabilization approach?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I'm trying to remember from year to year. The previous year, I think it kind of depends. I hate to not be able to provide like a figure, but it depends a lot on like the density of the grow line. And so a lot of that kind of depends, especially when we're like bringing in a board and harvesting. You know, we can pull the line up like quite fast. And then if we can also cut the kelp off quite fast. But then if depending on like any gaps in growth on the grow line, or like the density and thickness, that can really impact like the final yield. So it's hard to say like what the processor, which I understand is like an important kind of assessment of how like an optimal workflow could go, but it's hard to say like what, how many pounds we could process in a day. I do think that we could do just on this project, I think we did somewhere in the tens of thousands of pounds, and that was sort of with encountering many obstacles. So I think, with a bit more practice and maybe also a bit more accurate kind of like farmer forecasted yields, we could be better prepared for something like that. But the farmer forecasting is really kind of a crucial element, just being able to make sure that you have enough like materials on hand, to be able to handle the volume, an adequate workforce, all those types of things. I think additionally, we also were sort of prepared for a smaller volume. And so we had a plan to shred directly into the IBC totes. And I think, obviously on a commercial vessel with fish holds and things like that, the obvious thing to do would be to save your deck space and kind of process directly into fish holds and stuff if that's available to you. And so, that would change a lot of the workflow as well. So, it's kind of it's hard to kind of know exactly what's possible until you're faced with like large volumes to be able to really play around with things like that.
Yeah, fair enough. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, in the last meetup, Evie had shared that I guess this was in the further processing stage with their biostimulant studies, that the IBC totes were quite cumbersome for them. Did they work all right for you, or like the shredded kelp being transferred in and out of the IBC totes?
Yeah, I think so. I guess we never transferred them out, but they do end up being like, so I could see that being, a bit of a bottleneck, but they do have sort of a large, I think 1 or 2 inch valve at the bottom. So, um, I'm not sure if that was a bit of a bottleneck, but really on the boat, they were actually pretty convenient because, we had flying forks and so we could move them around pretty easily and kind of like, yeah, maneuver the deck space. They were super easy to load and offload, and to stack and kind of position to maximize like storage and deck space and things like that. And sort of not interrupt like the workflow as you were harvesting and storing product on board. Yeah, but I guess maybe they're working a little bit more with the end product. We were really just sort of like storing and transporting, not as much like having to remove or extract it. But I do think in that event, it probably would be easier to have a fish pump and totes or something, or fish pump and fish holds, just to be able to kind of offload larger volumes faster.
Willow has in here that she missed this boat, the stabilization format that you landed on this year in 2025.
Not frozen, no. We were using just sort of like a chemical stabilization agent. And so we just sort of added that as we were shredding into the IBC totes. And that kind of stabilized the kelp to keep it from disintegrating or changing.
Well, it's amazing to see and very impressive. You're doing great work. Any last questions before we move on? Brianna had her contact info in the chat as well. So I think we'll just keep moving along. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, next up we have Four Corner Foods. Abeets are here presenting on reducing impact of heavy metals in seaweed to address barriers of growth.
There we go. Oh, I just unmuted myself. Okay, hope everyone can hear me. Go into this presentation mode. Give me a second.
We can hear you well.
Okay. Yeah, so I come from the food industry and have a lot of transferable experience in processing food products. And so got involved with seaweed a few years ago. And this project is more about increasing consumption and increasing marketability of seaweed. And we do that by reducing the impact of heavy metals in seaweed. Seaweed is a sponge, and it attracts or absorbs what's in the water. And this is ubiquitous throughout the world in all waters. And so I'll just do I'll try to go through fast. I have lots of slides. So hopefully I'll do it as fast as possible, and you can stop me if I'm going too fast. But we'll go through a bit of the background, significance, the goals, what we've done so far, some results, and some conclusions and challenges. So as I mentioned, seaweed naturally contains some of these heavy metals and iodine, and the levels are dependent. It's not the same everywhere. It depends on the species. It depends on location, the time you harvest, your processing technique. But one thing to keep in mind is that we have limits to human consumption of some of these heavy metals and iodine. And so, what we want to do, a significance of this is that we want a higher allowable daily consumption. And how do we do that? And this will, drive economic growth, utilization of more harvested seaweed, and regardless of the source and or regardless of the processor, it's relevant globally to everyone who processes seaweed. So I know what we want to do is investigate processing techniques. Which process technique is going to reduce some heavy metals and iodine? And we picked water blanching versus steam blanching. This is applicable in the food industry. So as a transferable technology, it stabilizes seaweed before you do further processing. And we want to do that with water and steam blanching, with and without dehydration, and then recommend some best practices. So our approach is going to be compare water with steam and then measure the reductions. And the starting values sort of are relative because they're different at different seaweed levels and different areas and locations. So we completed a round 1 of trials. We did a preliminary study in September of 2024. I'll show you some results. Then we completed round 1 in May earlier this year. And then we're scheduled to do round 2 in the middle of August this year. Just showing you a snapshot of some of the equipment that was used. This work was done at the KSMSC Center in Kodiak, Alaska. And we have a electric water kettle where we can do water blanching. We also have like a steam chamber where we can introduce live steam, and that simulates steam blanching. And in the food industry, steam blanching versus water blanching is like a 50-50 split. Some companies use one technique, some companies another, and there's several advantages, disadvantages, energy, water use, whole bunch of things, and advantages, disadvantages of that. So you have a choice of what technique you could use. We were also using a tray dryer. This dryer is sort of like a small lab pilot dryer. There's like hundreds of different drying technologies, and many technologies can be used. These are some pictures. And maybe if I click this slide, I'm not sure if the video will come through, but here's some fresh seaweed. You know, we ran through washing and then we went through blanching. This one kind of, let me see if it plays. Can you all see it?
Yeah, you can see it.
Anyway, so, and then the bottom left two pictures are, one is of a seaweed being washed in a large bin tank. You know, in a commercial operation, you'd have different kind of washing. We were doing a pilot operation, so we were washing it in a tub. And then this picture where my mouse is currently showing what a steam blanched product looks like. It's also turned from brown to green. And you have all these steam, some holes for this live steam to come in. And then on the right, two pictures were showing dried seaweed in a dry rack. There's lots of graphs, and I don't want to confuse people, but I don't want to dwell too much on it also, but just speak in generalities. We can always have more questions later on. You can connect with me. But back in September 24, we just wide harvested some species of bull kelp, some wakame, some kombu, the sugar kelp and the ribbon kelp. And we're showing that the orange line here is the hot water blanch line. And the dark blue line is just washed. And you're showing quite a lot of reduction, 30%, 70%, 60% reduction. There was not a lot of steaming that we did at that time. Those results are coming later. And then, you know, the other heavy metal besides arsenic is cadmium. And these red marks are showing some increase actually, which is odd, some of the results. And I'm going to talk about that in a little while. When you look at iodine, iodine is a desirable thing, but it can also be undesirable if it's too much. And so, you know, there's a substantial amount of iodine reduction when you go through water blanching and also with steam blanching. They're all pointing towards that. When you think about lead is also a heavy metal, especially with Prop 65 in California. How much? And you're seeing a good amount of reduction on both water and steam blanching. Now, in May of 2025, we ran further trials, and this time we focused primarily on two species, kombu and wakame. And the chart on the right kind of shows a comparison of the dark blue lines are again washed, the orange lines are hot water blanch, and the green lines are steam blanch. So you're kind of seeing a superiority in reduction with the hot water rather than the steam blanching process. The table here kind of shows a 30 to 50% reduction. And in some cases on steam, you're actually showing a little bit of an increase. In wakame, you know, same kind of trend. You're seeing the hot water blanch showing a lot more reduction than the steam blanch. It's just like a ongoing pattern. Here's where I want to talk a little bit about how the results do look like it's concentrating, but I feel like there's been some measurement errors, and so we're redoing some of our samples, and those are the measurement anomalies that we see, which is somewhat of an issue when you do trials like this. You know, so it shows that the concentration is actually increasing, but if the starting value was more like the 38 here, which is what it's showing in the fourth sample versus the first three samples in kombu, and if they were at the higher numbers here, so we're getting these samples retested to see if it actually comes out, or do we have a concentration effect. Iodine, we're seeing a fantastic reduction again, anywhere from 80 to 90%. You know, sometimes as low as 8 and 23% as with steam blanch. Again, the hot water blanch, which is the orange ones, are showing a lot more reduction than the steam blanching on that. So here's some preliminary conclusions. We can say that hot water blanch results in greater heavy metal and iodine reduction as compared to steam blanch. We get about a 30 to 50% reduction with water blanch, and you get a 15 to 20% with steam blanch. And iodine, you have a dramatic impact, 87 to 90 something. And here on steam blanch, it's little lesser, but you still have it. But I'm making this comment on anomalies, and sometimes we see increased concentration, and we wanna drill down on that and work some more on that. So this slide is a little complicated, and I'll explain what it is. This kind of leads to the consumption amounts on a dry basis, or sorry, on a wet basis right now. So if you had a raw kombu, you would at 150 microgram a day is the allowable limit for iodine, your recommended daily allowance. So if we had about 81 parts per million as its inherent amount, then theoretically you could only consume 1.85 gram of this kelp before you go out of the recommended daily allowance. But if you blanch it, then suddenly you can consume about 25 grams. So that's a tremendous increase if you apply this process before this kelp is used in any kind of human consumption. So there's a difference between hot water and steam, where if you do steam blanch, yes, you would increase, but not as much as the hot water blanch. Same kind of thing with the ribbon kelp here, where inherently you would probably be able to consume only about 6.5 grams of it per day. But if you hot water blanched it, suddenly your consumption amount went up to 52 grams, or 51.7 grams, and 18 grams for steam blanch. So it's showing how these preliminary steps that you do in processing can result in a beneficial amount of consumption by increasing it. Same thing on a dry basis. This is experiments that we're going to do further in August. So these are some projected values. And you can see that, when it's dry, it's an extremely small amount of consumption because of the high amounts of iodine that's in the product. So I don't want to dwell on this too much, but talk a little bit about some challenges. Some analysis results didn't match the raw materials results or logical pattern. And then some were so low in number that we couldn't quantify. So our mitigation strategy is we're going to recheck some samples, and then we're going to increase the measurement to go to parts per billion instead of parts per million, and then see if that gets us some more. And then we had some trouble with getting raw material. It was difficult to obtain, but the community was helpful and helped us source that. So, in general, I can just say that, hey, it has achieved some progress towards choosing what's a good pre-processing technique, and that's going to lead to increased consumption. And importantly, one is to plan. I think Brianna mentioned in her call that, what's your market? And, that market is going to help us and guide us to what's the choice of the right processing technique and what's your intended sales channel. And this is a lasting impact. If this knowledge can go towards ongoing improvements and ongoing processing, and it's going to stay true for anybody who wants to process anywhere. So I'll stop here and invite any questions.
Thank you. Very interesting. Johnny, you want to go ahead?
Sure, I got a few questions. Thank you for a great presentation. Did you guys try, first off, how long did you wash the kelp, and did you try soaking the kelp? And then a third question is, did you use any frozen kelp?
So, yeah, we washed the kelp for about 2 to 4 minutes, and we did not soak it overnight. And again, I was just following sort of what's a normal process in the food industry through all kinds of fruits and vegetables that are processed for 30, 35 years. And generally, in a processing plant, you kind of give yourself a triple wash system or a 2 to 4 minute wash system before things move forward at 5,000 to 20,000 pounds an hour. So we stayed kind of with that, kind of simulating that. I think the other question you asked was, what's the last question you asked? The
Did you use any frozen product?
Oh, frozen. No, we did not use any frozen product. Yeah, so not sure what the results would have been on that. I think in my experience in the past, when I've done that, the frozen product hasn't delivered the same kind of color that you would get when you thaw a product and then try to blanch it or cook it. But it'd be interesting to see.
I have some questions if I may. This is my world, so now I'm excited. This is I have done this study before, so I know this very well, and the results are fantastic. With the cadmium results, I'm curious if it's just a divalent cation binding to alginate and whether you've looked at that, but that's a conversation for a later date. I think the like when you report the data in terms of dry weight versus as received, I think would be very useful because it's a little bit unclear when you're referring to it dry and wet. That wasn't, I'd love to know if like maybe in the full report I'll get that. I'd also point out that the FDA limits 1,100 micrograms per day. The recommended daily allowance is 150. So like you could, that's something I think you're probably aware of. I just think,
Yes, yes, the
yeah,
whole
yeah,
the whole the whole regulatory world is like a whole different segment by itself, and one has to kind of make their own interpretations and decisions. So if you want to use 1100 as a number, the point is that the relative impact is still going to remain the same.
yeah, of course. But you
Whatever
got 10
you would use
times the
at this
amount to work
limit,
with.
you
Yeah,
would use
yeah,
that at so the point is that we're dramatically increasing the potential for
absolutely.
consumption. So.
I guess my question would be, what is the mass balance of that kind of a process? When seaweed is about 40% minerals, blanching probably is going to remove most of them. How does that relate to pounds of fresh kelp from the farmer?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. I think that if and I'll just speak in generalities. Let's say you're getting 100 pounds from the farmer. You're probably gonna end up with 60 or 70 pounds after water blanching it, and probably about 80 to 90 pounds when you steam blanch it. So there's a little higher yield when you steam blanch because you don't depurate as much of the water. You don't lose as much water. But that's also obviously has an impact on how much heavy metal and iodine stays in versus flows out with the water. And it may be different for different heavy metals. So it may answer your cadmium question where it stays more bound versus, flows away. So the net result is that you have to employ a practical process. And when you do employ the practical process of like a hot water treatment or a hot steam treatment, then we're looking at the relative final impact that you are getting some sort of a reduction, and kind of makes sense from a enzymatic and stabilization standpoint and a color standpoint, but also kind of contributes to now we have reduced heavy metal concentration, so therefore more consumption. That's kind of how it logically falls out.
Thank you. Yeah, look forward to seeing the results in August, and yeah, curious about the anomalies, strange results.
Yeah. I mean, any kind of in fact, I would say that if there were not any strange results, it would be like, what? How did it all come out so perfect? But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's true.
it always happens.
Well,
Okay,
thank you for
thank
a
you.
great presentation, and yeah, it's great to see the data. I will move along here to Sequester Farms and Johnny. He has two different projects that were funded through the Joint Innovation project program. I don't know which one is first. Are we starting with the infrastructure and seeding or the waste heat pump dryer? Okay, so Johnny's starting with simulation and development of a kelp drying prototype using existing equipment. Thank you, Johnny.
All right, let's see. You guys see my screen all right and everything?
Yes.
Cool. My name is Johnny Antoni. I'm with Sequester Farms, and this first project was for a waste heat pump dryer, utilizing the waste heat off of a freezer unit. We move through our projects mostly on the basis of it's kind of an Alaskan entrepreneurial strategy, is that we do what we can with what we have available. And the things that we have available are a lot of these freezer units. However, as we go through this, you'll see we kind of change things up a little bit just due to what was available. And we also have had some hiccups in our timeline. Our initial timeline for development was spring of 2025. We were hoping to get kelp into the dryer. Our progress has come to a little halt through due to delays in funding, but we're still moving forward. So far, we've acquired, I'd say, about 80% of the equipment and done some of the build out. Through that build out and the development of the Monte Carlo study, we have found that we needed to change our setup. First, we switched from a container connex or getting the waste heat from a container nearby to getting the waste heat from an indoor freezer setup. It was a little bit more difficult to work with the on-site plan to get a side-by-side setup of a container, and so we went ahead and moved towards a building, which in all reality is going to be much easier and probably get some stronger results, hopefully. In addition, we are going to be adding a buffer tank to the heat pump dryer, so the tank will be, or a tank of water with less variation than a coil. So utilizing optimizing the heat pump's energy usage. This is our connex on the left-hand side, our insulated 20-foot connex. Inside, we built a false wall insulated and plugged up any sort of air gaps with duct tape and insulation. We have a door to get in, and then below you can see on the right-hand side, that's our filtration center or system for it. It's pretty rudimentary, hoping that it works. As you dry kelp, as many of you probably know, you get a lot of dust, especially raw kelp. If it's blanched, you might not get as much seawater salt dust. I'm sure it will accumulate, but in drying raw products, it can degrade equipment pretty rapidly, and so we put in a filtration system as well, air filtration system as well. So far, we have designed the placement, put some of the pieces of equipment in place, and built the heat pump transfer, the heat transfer box on the heat pump. You can see that here on the right-hand side. And essentially all it's doing is we're going to duct right into that, and that's going to force air to be pulled through the radiator, warmer waste heated air to be pulled through the radiator of the heat pump. With that, we've designed the Monte Carlo study. Well, I haven't. A partner in this project, Sam Thornton, who's down in Ketchikan, has designed the study, and then we've also built out the sensor system and ventilation system. We were trying to order it, but kind of ran out of funds, and so we still need to finish that build out, but also need to finish the heat transfer system, which is ventilation system inside the building. just for reference, the building has a peak that gets relatively hot in the summer. It's a consistent temperature of 105 degrees, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. And we're working to pump that air through this box and through the heat pump, and then to superheat the heat pump to provide some efficiencies in developing heat for our dryer. With that being said, we are working to develop also, and I forgot to put in here, is the humidity control system, which will be pretty much run off the sensors. We're hoping to develop a passive system to where that the humidity will reach will maintain a 60 to 70% humidity inside the Connex, hopefully less, but it's kind of what we're shooting for at this point. So we've adjusted our timeline due to delay funding and scheduling. I'm headed out to go fishing this week, and so I will not be able to continue work on it. And that timeline is hopeful in that we will start development again, or continue the build out by September 19th, and then finish it by October 17th and begin the Monte Carlo study, which this will force us to probably use a good deal of frozen kelp. However, luckily we have some perennial species on our lines that is up for grabs, and we may be able to use some split kelp, depending on how much is degraded by then. That being said, we'll begin the Monte Carlo study hopefully immediately thereafter, but I imagine there'll be some changes to the setup as we hone everything in to finish this up come December. But yeah, that's pretty much the gist of that project. I can switch to the other one. And if there's any questions on this one, I can
we
do
can
those.
open up for any questions in between.
Hey Johnny, I might have missed it. Where's my thing? Do you need to like vent out, like up high, and heat rises? Like I didn't see it. I don't know if you discussed this. Like, but is there like ways to flow out at the top, or is that in there as well, or just the vents at the bottom for the intake?
So we're actually
Okay, I see. Yeah.
so the heat pump itself will be venting through the
Intake.
the
Yeah.
ventilation system. It'll just be passing through. But inside the Connex, we'll have um, a vent port, and it's going to be primarily for humidity control. And we're playing with the idea if we actually need to create a larger one, if we need to create another fan to extract air. We're uncertain at this point. Interestingly enough, these Connexes come with a vent port to control humidity, but I think they're at a much slower pace than what we might be dealing with. And so we might need to figure out a way to supercharge that. But great question.
Yeah, like because when you're evaporating like 80% of the weight in water, it will tend to condense. I've tried drying things in boxes before and made that mistake, and it just really sucked. So like
Yeah,
you don't think about
yeah,
get rid of the moisture part all the time.
yeah.
So, cool.
Yeah, we've also played around with an idea of a cold water radiator to condense water and having a drain directly below it. Um, just have probably coils of PEX below the insulated Connex, just out of the sun, staying cool, and a boiler pump running it through a radiator down at the base of the Connex. I don't know if it's going to be necessary. Sam has assured me that it probably won't be, but we'll find out.
Cool.
Johnny, I had a question. This is Abizer. So, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, is this intended just for like a local production, or are you just trying it to see if it commercializes itself, or what's the intended purpose of
I would
this?
I would say the latter of the two. It's so with all these units nearby and available throughout Alaska, if we can show efficacy through the movement of air through a heat pump, I'd imagine the through direct connection to a freezer unit would benefit both the freezer and the dryer, and you would gain a lot more heat involved with that. In addition, if that was to work, building that to a larger scale would also be possible. It's just kind of stepping stones, essentially, just doing what we can with what we have. See if it
Okay.
warrants further investment.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Well, is that it?
I think so. I think we can move on.
All right. All right. This is again, my name's Johnny Antoni. I'm with Sequester Farms, and we came up with some innovative array designs 2 years ago to develop the cultivation of bull kelp. And with that, they were successful, and we got another grant to refine those, which proved pretty great. So of the three, and I didn't have the three listed all together. We have three different designs. One was tethered to the surface and two tethered to the seafloor. Our initial setup was we went from 6 feet below the surface on our surface tethered array to 30 feet below the surface. We found out that not only was 30 feet way too deep, but it was also a giant pain in the butt to manage. It's a large area, a difference in area of for buoys, weights, and lines to be. It's a lot of area for things to swing around and get tangled. And so we reduced that from 8 to 15 feet because last year we saw about around 8 feet of growth really was where the bull kelp was able to get larger. And we saw that large area of growth or that large size of bull kelp past 15 feet through 18, but we decided to choose 15 because it was deemed much more manageable. And again, we're just trying to try things within reason. With this project, we weren't trying to make it absolutely perfect as much as what we could possibly do as farmers with the equipment that we have. That being said, the weights that we used were under 200 pounds, and the spacing that we used was 10 feet between our lines. We chose 10 feet because of the tangling of the lines and the difficulty of harvest that we had that first year in the lines that we did outside of our project. But yeah, that being said, we deployed it November 10th. We seeded December 6th, and it was left at 8 feet from the surface until January 25th, where we lowered it. And which was way earlier than we lowered it the year before, but we checked the lines and saw pneumatocysts developed. And one of the key metrics of success before we got the weights on. By putting the weights on initially, we allowed the strongest bull kelp to get to the surface first, and allowing the strongest bull kelp to get to size rather than all the bull kelp growing all the time, only reaching a certain size. And that's what made the 200 pounds more manageable or work for the growth of the large kelp. This year, we had a few issues. Some of our spreader bars broke loose. We need to figure out a better linkage system for those, something that's easier to manage. Something with a little less movement would be ideal. But yeah, so the wave action on the buoy kind of sawed through some of our linkages. That being said, we had some, well, I guess this isn't an issue, but I just put it in there. We had great growth. We averaged from 11 to, or from 8 to 11 and a half feet. We averaged 11.36 pounds per foot. In addition, I should mention these lines, all the lines that we did were spaced seeded. I don't, and there was a few differences in the spacing. I don't have exact metrics on the differences between those space seedings. These we haven't had the time to kind of go through everything. I just was able to snag these high level averages. And the difference in space of growth next to a 9-inch space of no growth. In addition, we did another set that had a 2-inch space of growth with about a 16-inch space of no growth. And so excited to get to those metrics and kind of pull out any lessons learned there. And also to wrap up the slide, from the 11 to 15, we had a 10.22 pounds per square foot. So a lot of weight, a lot of bull kelp. It was pretty amazing to see us grow just about to wild size bull kelp on a suspended array. That being said, next we did the benthic peak array. The changes how we could utilize screw anchors to tether it to the seafloor. And so we ended up just using anchors. And our site was a little too deep for about half the line to grow, which if you're losing half the line, it's just not something that makes any sense to do. And so to combat that, we put in a screw anchor with a pulley system and a hardball buoy. And so we set our anchor down near the screw anchor, attached a hardball buoy to the line, and then pulled the anchor out to lower the line after we had seeded everything. On the surface, we could see a set of corks, which were different colors, but easier to just count the corks to see the depth of the line. And it was, yeah, it worked pretty great. We deployed it November 13th and seeded it January 30th. The issues that we had, it was difficult to get the screw anchors in the exact place that we wanted them to be. Measuring things via GPS and then going underwater and putting them in areas. You have like I tried to build in like a 20-foot discrepancy, and we were about 30 feet off, which we had to shorten our lines a little bit. And then I also didn't account for the amount of scope the tension would create. And so it added another about 10 to 15 feet off of the line. So we had to shorten our lines a little bit in order to get the lines to depth. Once the kelp grew and was floaty, then we could not get it back to, well, we eventually were able to, but had a lot of difficulty getting it back to the desired depth. Just by pulling the anchor, there's so much tension on it, the anchor would just shoot back towards the pulley. And then the area closest to the water line with wave action had the tendency to twist, which led to a lot of breakage and kelp loss. That being said, you notice that our grow averages, we had 7 pounds per foot for the 11 or the 8 to 11, but that was the near surface area that had breakage. Our area that was fully submerged the whole time, we had about a 15 pounds per foot average, which we were able to grow wild size bull kelp, and it was really exciting to see. Couldn't find any pictures of it exactly. I know we have some around. It was a lot of work, so I didn't necessarily take pictures with my phone on this and go out, but it was really exciting to see. In addition, we also tried a benthic longline array that did not grow. We had a little bit of trouble getting it to depth, the desired depth, and then in addition, we put floats underneath the substrate that we were planting on, the monkey fists, and in retrospect, that was a bad idea because it held the lines, it held the substrate out of the water during freezes, and I think theorize that probably is what killed it. In addition, there was a lot of excessive handling. You can see all the knots in this grow line. But in summary, negatives for the surface valley array were spreader bar, buoy, weights. There's a lot of wear points, and it's high maintenance. It's difficult to harvest, but the positive is it has a consistent high growth and capacity, and it's very scalable. The benthic peak array is negative. It's difficult to set up. The long spans without buoy control can allow for bowing in the line, which can lead to line loss or growth loss or product loss. And setting up the array requires dive work, and it's not easily scaled. Although I have some ideas, it's just not going to be easy. Positive though, it's the highest yield to date, and it's very low maintenance once it's set. Sorry, that went kind of long.
Thanks, Johnny. It was great to see the pictures, and I like how you laid out the positive, the negatives here in the last slide. Or do you think that are you going to continue to do both types, or are you?
We will. It really kind of depends on if we can move those screw anchors for our next season. I really want to continue the benthic array with a new style with flotation. But if we can move those screw anchors in time, and then in addition, we'll probably try the monkey fist as well, just because it's the easiest to deploy and easiest to pull up. Well, probably not the easiest to pull up at this point. The benthic peak was pretty cake. But we'll try. I'm hoping to try all three, but it really depends on how much we can get done before we plant.
Yeah, that makes sense. Does anyone else have any questions?
I do have one.
Go ahead.
Go for it.
Yeah, you said about 7-something pounds per foot on the bull kelp growth. I've heard different numbers from different farmers. I know there's a metric saying pounds per foot, but I'm trying to understand if we can also say by acre, so that you have, then there are lines and the distance spacing between lines and all that kind of comes into account. So it kind of gives you an overall picture of how much surface area of water gives you how much product. Is that an optimal metric? Is that a reasonable metric?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it is, especially with the surface array. With the screw anchor array, it's just a single long line, which if I think that we might be able to get that to be a larger, more anchorage comparable array with it's going to take some engineering, but I think that one could work there eventually. But the surface array, the suspended array, is done on a catenary. This particular catenary was 100 feet across, and we had 20 lines on it. And so it was 100 by 200 feet, and on those lines we averaged 10 to 11 pounds per foot. I'd say 20 times 200 is 4,000 feet of line in a 100 by 200 area. So I think we could probably figure something out with that.
Yeah, per square foot. Yeah.
It was actually 21 lines, but we ended up moving that other line because it was an We could fit 21 lines on there, but we got rid of that other line because we couldn't connect it with the spreader bar. So, but just as reference.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I don't see that as a standard communication between farmers and people in different areas. So I was just kind of wondering if that could become an adoptable metric so people can kind of talk the same language, that here's how much we grow in this much amount of water.
Yeah, and in addition to that point, it really depends on the farm setup and the depth of the farm, just because the scope of the anchors can take up a good bit of space in an area. Like if I have a 25-acre farm, I might only be able to farm 15 acres because the scope of my anchors are just taking up
Yeah.
so much space. And so, if we were to do that, we would probably have to move towards the grow field size and not the size of the actual lease.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. All right.
Any other questions? Thank you so much, Johnny, for giving the back-to-back report. I know that's not easy. And thanks everyone for staying on for the extra 15 minutes here. I'll be in touch with those who had talked about potential project extensions, and just to really appreciate everyone's time and engagement. And we'll have the interim reports and/or presentations, and then also the meetups posted up on the AMC and AFDF websites shortly. And as always, never hesitate to reach out with any questions or concerns. I'm here to help, and I apologize for funding delays. We're doing our best. So with that, I hope everyone has a great rest of their day, and I'll see you all at some point soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.